Good evening and welcome to the County of Brant's Planning and Development Committee meeting. Tonight's meeting is an open public meeting as required by the Planning Act. This meeting is being held in the Council Chambers at 7 Broadway Street West in Paris and is also live streamed on the county's YouTube channel as an agenda and meetings to be found on the council and committee agendas, meetings and minutes pages of the county's website at brant.ca. Present tonight are the members of council, Deputy Clerk Briar Allison, Director of Development Planning Matt Vaughn, and a number of planners and applicants as well. Everybody welcome. Attendance has been taken, and there's been no regrets, and Christine Garneau is online. So if we could have a mover and a second for the agenda. Moved by Councillor Pierce and seconded by Councillor Kyle. All those in favor? Oh, do we have additions to the agenda? David.
Yes, Mr. Chair. I just want to add a question under other business, please.
Any other additions? Lucas Oakley.
Through the chair, in regards to report 11.1, we advertise it online as being a public information meeting. So I asked that we set aside section 10C of the procedural bylaw so we can hear any delegations that are here in regards to that report.
Okay. So should we do that now? Or? Okay, so you'll move that. And do we have a second for that? Second by Councillor Howes. All those in favor of the motion as amended, agenda as amended? All okay, passed. And do I have to then pass the agenda?
So that one was waive the rules that we did.
Yeah.
So now we can just do agenda as
amended. Okay, then approve the agenda as amended. So if we have a mover for that. Moved by Lucas Oakley and second by Councillor Kyle. All those in favor? Just throw the little loops in there. Do we have any declarations of pecuniary interests? Okay. If you do so in the future, let us know. There's no delegations, petitions, or presentations at this point. Okay. Adoptions of the minutes. Do we have a mover and a seconder for that? Moved by Mayor Bailey, seconded by Lucas Oakley. All those in favor? Passed. Business arising from minutes. Is there any items arriving from the minutes as discussed? Okay. Seeing none, do we have a mover for the minutes? Moved by Councillor Pierce, seconded by Councillor Bell. All those in favor? Passed. Okay, so now we move on to the public hearing under section 11 of the County Brant Telecommunications Tower. We have a mover of the recommendation for this one. Moved by Councillor Oakley, second by Councillor Miller. Okay, if we could have the planner, Helena Helma, come forward to speak.
It's not up on the screen. Good evening. I am presenting Telecommunication Tower Application CT3-23-HH for 162 4th Concession Road. Staff are recommending that Forbes Bros Inc. has completed consultation with the County of Brant and the public, and that the telecommunication tower as proposed at 162 4th Concession Road is in accordance with the preferred location guidelines of the communication tower and a communication antenna preferred location protocol. The subject lands are located north of 4th Concession Road and lying between Murr Road North and West Quarter Town Line Road. The subject lands have a frontage of approximately 533 meters and a lot area of approximately 40 hectares. The subject lands are located within the agricultural zone and designation, which contain the agricultural operations in the surrounding area. The applicant is proposing to establish a 45-meter tall self-support telecommunication structure situated in a 3-meter by 3-meter area. As part of the application, the agent has provided a detailed site selection report and a site plan identifying the proposed tower location and a letter of concurrence request. The preferred setback is 3 times the tower's height, which is 135 meters. There are no natural heritage features or sensitive land uses that are located within the county's preferred setback distance of 135 meters. No trees or vegetation are proposed to be removed. To conclude, the application has completed the required public consultation and is currently going through consultation with the County of Brant. The application is identified in keeping with the preferred location guidelines as outlined in the Communication Tower Preferred Location Protocol. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Do we have any questions for our planner? Okay, I don't see any, so thanks very much. If there's future, we'll call you back. Okay, I don't believe there is the applicant here to speak to this, right? Okay, so is there anybody from the floor that would like to speak to this application? Okay, I asked once. Okay. I'm going to ask a second time. Okay. And I'm going to ask the third and final time. Okay. Seeing none, I will call this portion of the public meeting closed. Is there any questions of the applicant? Okay, go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Through you. It's unfortunate that the applicant isn't here because I'm not sure if the planner would know. What additional range is this going to give as a 45-meter tower?
Mm-hmm.
Do we know that information by chance?
Through the chair, I don't know that information.
Okay. No, and I wouldn't, and not in a bad way. I wouldn't expect you to because, Mr. Chair, if I could, because this is one of the first ones I've seen in forever where there's no houses within the range and they're asking for a 45, and I would say make it a 60 if it's gonna extend the range. You know what I mean? Because this is a perfect location, and they've got ample space for the next house. It's unfortunate that the applicant isn't here, so I guess I'll have to wait and ask that question.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Thank you,
Councillor Miller.
Just, one other question for the applicant who's not here. Slightly to the west, there's quite a few wind turbines in Oxford County. I'm just wondering, do they impact the signal at all? Do they have any impact on those towers?
Would you know? To our planner?
Through the chair, I also don't know the answer to that question. I can't bring that back to the applicant, though.
Okay. Any other questions for our planner? Okay. The motion has been moved and seconded, and I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor? Okay. Any opposed? Okay, that is passed. So we'll move on to 7.2. And that is also Haley that's going to be speaking to it. We do have a motion that has been recommended by staff. Do we have a mover for the motion? Moved by Councillor Pierce and seconded by Councillor Howes. Okay. If you would like to go, I'm going to declare the public meeting now open. And if you could go ahead and speak.
Okay, can you turn it up?
Hold it up.
I am presenting telecommunication tower application CT4-23-HH for 525 Scenic Drive. Staff are recommending that Signum Wireless Towers, Inc. has completed consultation with the County of Brant and public, and that the telecommunication tower as proposed at 525 Scenic Road is not in accordance with the Section 4 Preferred Location Guidelines of the Communication Tower and Communication Antenna Preferred Location Protocol. The subject lands are located at the corner of Scenic Drive and East River Road. The lands are designated rural residential in the County of Brant official plan and zoned open space in the zoning bylaw 6116. The applicant is proposing to establish a 50-meter tall self-support telecommunications structure situated within a 3-meter by 3-meter locked area. As part of the application, the agent has provided a detailed site selection report and a site plan identifying the proposed tower location and a letter of concurrence request. The preferred setback is 3 times the tower's height, which is 150 meters. There are natural heritage features and sensitive land uses that are located within the county's preferred setback distance of 150 meters. The radius of 150 meters contains 2 residential dwellings. No trees or vegetation are proposed to be removed as a result of the tower installation. To conclude, the application has completed the required public consultation on December 8th, 2023, and is currently going through consultation with the County of Brant. The application is identified as not in keeping with the preferred location guidelines as outlined in the Communication Tower Preferred Location Protocol. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Do we have any questions for our planner? Councillor Bell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, through you to Hayley. Just for clarity, and perhaps for people listening, the land upon which this tower will be located, if it's ultimately approved, belongs to the county?
Through the chair, yes, that's correct.
Okay. So I take it then that the county, and I don't by that mean necessarily the council yet, must have taken some comfort and must have been in agreement with the proposal to put this tower in this location. Who in the council, in the county staff made the decision that we knew full well would not meet our protocol?
Through the chair, I believe the applicant works with the IT department, the director of the department, if I'm not mistaken, and the report gets brought to council for review before we proceed with the application.
Thank you for that answer. Just a follow up to that. So assuming that our IT department are conscious of the fact we're not meeting our own protocol, there must be an overriding reason why we go ahead with this. Could you share what that overriding reason is?
Matt might be able to answer this.
Yeah, through the chair to the whole committee, I'm not sure we know that answer, but it's something that we would be happy to follow up with our IT department with and provide an answer at the future council meeting.
Yeah, I think, if I may say, that the optics of this don't look very good when we set out protocol and then we ourselves do not follow it. Thank you.
Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. 3 to the planner. Haley, on page 37 of our package, you say that the tower is consistent with the provincial policy statement. And then on page 38, you state that the tower conforms to the policy of the provincial growth plan. And also on page 38, the tower conforms to the policies of the County of Brant official plan. So we have all these higher levels of rules, regulations, or directions, or guidelines, whatever. And then you get to the lowest one, the protocol. So it meets, I always thought we had to meet the higher ones, and if we did that, we were good. But then we get to the last one, the bottom one, the protocol, it doesn't meet our guideline. And I know when we do the official plan, staff are bending over backwards to make sure that it is conforming to the provincial growth plan and the provincial policy statement. So do you believe that the protocol is, how do you reconcile that the protocol doesn't reconcile with these higher levels of policies?
We'll pass that to Matt.
Yeah, through the chair to all the committee, it's actually a great point you're bringing up, and it's something that we're looking at right now. We're reviewing our protocol and just trying to figure out, what efficiencies we can make. One of the things we need to change about it is likely opening up the separation distance a little bit. So it is something that We're reviewing and we're comparing with other municipalities. Our plan is to bring a report and a draft new protocol back to committee in May. So stay tuned for that. It is something that we'll be looking to align with our official plan and with the provincial policy statement.
Just to follow, yeah, I appreciate the answer. Thank you, Matt, because it, like you say, it doesn't make sense when it as the planner points out, it conforms to all these higher levels of policies. And if you look at other municipalities, you will see that they don't have a choice. They have to put them in sometimes fairly dense residential areas. They'll put them in hospitals. So I understand what the protocol says. I'm just trying to understand how it relates to the others. And from what I see, it does not. So yeah, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. Thanks, Haley. And now we're going to call on the agent, Lucas Cuff and Sarah Taylor, and I believe they are online.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm just going to share my screen. I hope that's visible. Let me know if you guys cannot see that. So good evening, everyone. My name is Lucas Cuff. I'm planner working at Frontier International here with my colleague Sarah Taylor. We are representing Signum's interest in the proposed telecommunication tower at 525 Scenic Drive. Today, I'm just going to explain the radio frequency map that was submitted to planning staff to provide some more context on why the tower is needed in the area. So here's the image of the estimated radio frequency map created by Signum. In the middle is where the proposed tower is going to be. So on the top left of the photo, there's a legend showing different colors that reflect the levels of coverage in a particular area. The legend goes from red, being the lowest levels of coverage, to blue, which is the highest levels of coverage. In the middle of the map is where the proposed Signum wireless tower is proposed. This section is shown to be the lowest levels of coverage due to the lack of telecommunication infrastructure. We can see closer to the peripheries of the ring that coverage does get better with it being in the middle with the yellow and green tints, where much of the telecommunication infrastructure is in this area. I hope this provides a little more understanding, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Councillor Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you. So if in fact this tower went through and it was put up, are you telling me that the sections there that are red would change to potentially green or yellow?
Yes, I wouldn't say that all of it would be, but it would be a much better coverage for this area.
Oh, follow up if I could? Sure. Okay, you say not all of it. Are we talking half of it? Are we talking the middle circle? How much of that? To me, most of that, what we can see on the screen, is pretty much red. So if we put this tower up, if it's approved, how much of that is going to be affected? 10%? 80%? 20%?
I would say, to you, Mr. Councillor, I would say probably most likely 80%, if not more, because it is a tall tower. It's at 50 meters. So yeah, it would, and it's in more of a rural area, which means it has a greater potential to impact a higher area of lands for coverage. So I would say 80+% of this area of the red would be enhanced coverage.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions for the applicant? Thanks very much, Mr. Cuff, for speaking. I'm going to open the floor now for the first time to the community to speak. I would like to remind them that if they wish to inform for future decisions of the application, to sign the sheet at the back of the podium and state their name and address for the public record. Is there anybody from the public that would like to come forward and speak? Okay, I'm going to ask the second time if there's anybody in the public who would like to come forward to speak. And I'm going to ask a third time if there's anybody from the public that would like to come forward to speak. So I'm going to close this portion of the public meeting and open it up to our councillors to ask any further questions. Councillor Oakley.
Through the chair to staff. If I remember correctly, the last sort of telecommunications towers that we dealt with, that we had the same sort of issue with in where the provincial policy statement would have supported the tower where the protocol didn't, was the tower from November 14th, 9 Main Street in St. George. How far away is this tower from the nearest building? Like how far are we off the setback?
Through the chair, I checked. It is 90 meters from
90
the
meters.
nearest house.
Okay. Through the chair, if I may. So in the application for the tower in St. George, that was about, we were missing about 1/3 of the setback. So roughly, if we look at these two things in a similar context, this one is closer to being in compliance with the protocol versus the one that we did approve back in November, which is just some food for thought.
Is there any other comments or questions? Councillor Chambers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This application is a little bit unique in that most applications, we don't have the ability to approve or not approve. We just comment. In this case, since it's on county-owned land, by virtue of it being on county-owned land, we can refuse to have it on county-owned land. In that respect, refusing the application. In light of the fact that it doesn't meet the protocol that we set up to offer comments on whether it should be approved or not, and by virtue of the comments that were received by the public at the community meeting, I'm not so sure that this application should go forward. And I think we do have the right to say that we don't want it on county land, and at the appropriate time, I think we should make that decision. If we are not in approval of the tower, we can refuse it by simply saying that not on county land in this location.
Councillor Oakley.
Through the chair to staff, in this regards, if we were to say defer this until we have the new protocol in May, are we at risk of going to the OLT with a circumstance or with an application like this, or because we're right now acting as a recommending body, that wouldn't be the case?
Through the chair to committee, there's no risk of this going to OLT. Ultimately, we make a recommendation or we take a stance. There's no approval process for this. It's just either we support it moving forward or we don't.
We would have the option of delaying it. To delay? Yeah, the decision.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Of course. Yeah. Good point. We could defer our judgment or our decision to support or not, and just push this off, and obviously work with our IT department and with the applicant to find a more suitable location. That's a good point. Yeah.
If we wanted to defer, we would yeah, so we'd first defer, yeah, so we'd have a motion to defer. Okay. Okay. So Councillor Oakley, would you like to make a motion to defer?
Yes, through the chair, I'd like to make a motion to defer this until we are looking at our new policy in May.
And we'll have a seconder in Mayor Bailey. Okay. Any discussion? Councillor Chambers.
Again, if council or if committee wants to recommend refusal, we can do that through another avenue of simply passing a resolution saying that we do not wish to have this tower on county-owned property, and we're well within our rights to do that, and that would necessitate the applicant to do another search and bring it forward. But if it doesn't meet our protocol and we don't want it, we should just say, don't want it on our land, and then that it goes away. If we defer it, it comes back, and we're still going to have to make that decision. If it's the wish of council, which I think it should be, we should simply pass a resolution saying that the application is unsuitable due to the fact that we do not wish to have it located on county-owned property.
Okay, we'd have to, okay. Councillor House. Okay, go ahead.
I'm speaking to the motion. And I understand what Councillor Chambers was saying. To me, if we're within a couple of months of having a new rule book or a new lens with which to look at this, I'd rather relook at this application within that new lens in a couple of months. Partially because I envision if we kill it and say go find another spot, the next spot is likely to be even closer to more residential. So in my mind, it's appropriate to look at this application another day under our new rule book, and based on that, I'm prepared to support Councillor Oakley's motion.
Councillor Cobb.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Through you, I too am in support of the motion to defer. This particular area is one that we all know really struggles to have connectivity, whether it's cell phone, internet, and at this point in time, there's not a lot of alternative solutions for them. So I'd rather wait and have a look at it with a new lens and see whether it conforms and make a decision at that time.
Okay. Councillor Chambers.
Could I just ask a question of clarification? I'm wondering the councillors that want to defer this because we want to look at the application with our new guidelines. Why didn't we want to do that with the first one? Seems a little bit why do one and not the other? It seems a little bit.
I think we weren't aware that the new protocols were coming forward so fast. So, Councillor Bell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Like Councillor James, I'm struggling with this one a bit because there have been occasions when we have had recommendations from staff which says this application doesn't meet our protocol. And we've accepted that, but we've gone a step further and we said, despite that, we think it's a good idea to put the tower there. We actually made a positive step to put a non-compliant tower in location. And here we are, because it's our land, we feel like we've got extra degrees of freedom to say no. I think deferral makes some sense if there's going to be, if we have the expectation of a change in the protocol. Because the factors of safety in this protocol, or underpinning this protocol, are massive. You know, we're talking about factors of safety of 50. So if we brought the protocol down to 1 times the height of the tower, my guess, I don't know the science totally behind this, but my guess is the factor of safety will reduce from 50 to 15. But still very safe. And I think if we'd known, if we'd had that 1 times the height of the tower a few months ago when we were talking about St. George, we wouldn't have had the discussion at all. We'd have said yes and moved on. So I think it's time that we looked at this protocol. It's just causing too much angst and aggravation. I think we should step back, look at the science, take credit for massive factors of safety and make things simpler for ourselves, simpler for the people who want to put towers around the place, and give much more clarity to our residents.
Okay. Is there any other comments or questions? Okay. So we have a motion on the table to defer, and so that trumps the other motion. So all those in favor of deferral? All those opposed? Okay, is passed. Thank you very much. Motion is carried. Moving on to public hearing under the Planning Act to receive information from the public, ZPA 2323 ES 213 Maple Avenue South. We did move that we would allow other people to speak to this one. So that's been at the beginning. So if we could have our planner come forward, Emily, speak to that. And I didn't move the motion.
Okay, good evening, members of the Planning and Development Committee. This evening I will be presenting zoning bylaw amendment application ZBA 18-23-SL for 213 Maple Avenue South from J.H. Cahoon Engineering on behalf of DeMonk Farms Limited in the geographic township of Burford. The subject lands are located west of Maple Avenue South and north of Fairfield Road. The property is surrounded by agricultural land uses and surrounds a small cluster of low-density rural residential development that is at the intersection of Maple Avenue South and Fairfield Road. The total site area is approximately 60 hectares with a frontage of 837 meters on Maple Ave South and 456 meters on Fairfield Road. The existing subject site is currently farmed as part of a larger farming operation. The southeastern corner of the property is currently designated as hamlets and villages under the current official plan. The applicant wishes to rezone this portion of the lands at approximately 1.5 hectares in size from agricultural to hamlets and villages to implement the direction of the current and future official plans, specifically to permit rural residential land uses in this portion of the property. Future planning applications would be required for the creation of residential building lots on private services. Subject lands are designated as agriculture and hamlets and villages within the County of Brant official plan and zoned as agriculture within the zoning bylaw 6116. So to date, no comments have been received as part of the public circulation. As mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, this presentation is for public information purposes only as required under the Planning Act, and a recommendation will be presented to staff, presented by staff to council next month. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, so we have any questions for our planner? Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through to Emily. Emily, looks like two entrances on Maple Ave South. It's on a rather sharp bend in the road. This hasn't been looked at yet by Public Works or anything for an entranceway, I assume at this point.
Through the chair, at this point, in terms of establishing the actual building criteria for that lot, no. That would be addressed through future plan of subdivision or severance application.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, ideally, it would be nice if they didn't have any going on to Maple Ave South. They all went on Fairfield Road, but given the size of the lot, I don't know if that's possible. But I could see that being a problem. That's all, with two of the driveways going on to Maple Ave South. So I'll leave it at that, but just know that I think it could be an issue.
Okay. Councillor Chambers.
Just further to what Councillor Miller has said, Councillor Miller may recall, and I think Councillor Cole may recall, when Maple Avenue was reconstructed, this particular intersection was left unreconstructed for a year or 2 years maybe, while they tried to acquire property and whatnot to make this bend a little bit safer for the speed limit of the Maple Avenue, which was 80 kilometers an hour at that time. The negotiations kind of fell through with the property owners, and the road was eventually reconstructed with a speed limit of 60 kilometers an hour, I believe, and which tells me that that intersection may have some issues associated with it, as Councillor Miller's suggestion is suggesting. So Public Works should have a look at that, and maybe that would influence the orientation of the lots. But as far as designation goes, it is designated in the official plan for this use. And the only other question I would have is that I can recall another application way back when where there was a setback requirement for a cemetery. And I'm just wondering, I'm not sure whether our setbacks related to residential properties with regard to cemeteries. There was with agricultural buildings, if I recall, in the Hatchley area. So that may want to be looked at as well.
Councillor Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to continue on with the whole driveway thing here, but not the ones on Maple, the ones on Fairfield. I'm wondering, and I know now is not the time, but when Rhodes takes a look at it and it goes to the next step, I'm wondering if we could flip those driveways to the other sides of the property to get them further away from that intersection.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Thanks, Emily. I'm going to call upon the agent to speak now, and I believe Bob Phillips is online.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Yes, this is an application to rezone the lands to permit the residential development in accordance with the OP. We've heard the comments about the location of entrances, and will certainly, as the comments come through, consider adjusting the locations to meet. Have no issue with that. Other than that, I'm here to answer any questions you might have.
Do we have any questions for the planner applicant? Okay, seeing no questions. I'm going to open the meeting now up to the public. If there's anybody from the public who would like to speak this application today. Okay, I don't see anybody from the public. I'm going to ask a second time. And a third time. Okay. So I'm going to close this portion of the public meeting, and we have a recommendation. Do we have a mover for the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Pierce, second by Councillor Coleman. Okay. Is there any questions now to the applicant or the planner? Okay. Seeing no questions, I will call the recommendation. All those in favor? Opposed? Okay, that motion is passed.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. And that closes this section. So we move on to the public hearing under the Planning Act to consider staff recommendations. There is none. Consent items, there is none to be approved. We do have some, there's no staff, well, we have a staff report. So Jessica Kitchen, RPT 017724, chickens in residential areas. Before she gets ready, could we have a motion for the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Howes and seconded by Councillor Oakley. Okay. Jessica, if you'd like to speak to it.
Thank you, Chair and members of committee. So staff is pleased to be here this evening to present item 11.1 to the committee. This item is in response to direction received back in November 2023, wherein committee provided direction on option 3, which was to permit chickens in all residential areas of the county, subject to receiving some further information from staff regarding the project, as well as some suggested guidelines for regulation of chickens and overview of public engagement for the project. And so that's exactly what staff's report seeks to provide this evening. I have a short presentation here, all of 5 slides that I hope to go through with you this evening, and then we can open it up for some questions. Myself, Greg Bergeron, Director of Enforcement and Regulatory Services, is here this evening as well to answer any questions. So as I mentioned, the report this evening is really in response to direction that staff had received back in November of 2023. At this step in the project, we are looking to obtain feedback from and direction from this committee to prepare a backyard HEM bylaw for the county, as well as amending bylaws concerning adjustments to land use provisions and new set fines in the County of Brant comprehensive zoning bylaw, as well as the County of Brant animal control bylaw, as well as prepare a recommendation report for committee's consideration, which we're hoping to bring forward as soon as possible. We're thinking May 2024 if committee thinks that's appropriate. This report is before the Planning and Development Committee this evening, not the Policy Development and Strategic Initiatives Committee, which it would typically be. However, because this project does require a minor amendment to the Comprehensive County of Brant zoning bylaw, it is in fact under the Planning Act, and so it is being brought forward to the Planning and Development Committee. Amending bylaws, just for clarity, do not form part of staff's report this evening. That's not what staff is seeking direction on at this time. Regulations and bylaws will need to be developed as part of next steps through the project, following public engagement and, of course, feedback from this committee. So draft regulations will need to consider a number of items. In the package in front of committee this evening, attachment 1 makes some detailed suggestions as far as potential regulations to address chickens in residential areas and help to regulate chickens. Such things as public health, mitigation of potential health risks, diseases and outbreaks, sustainable food production and lifestyle, also biosecurity measures, as well as animal health and welfare, and property inspection and a potential licensing program as well to help track chickens if committee thinks appropriate. So minor amendments, as I mentioned, will be required to the County of Brant comprehensive zoning bylaw as part of this project, as well as the animal control bylaw. Minor amendments to the County of Brant zoning bylaw will seek to adjust land use provisions to allow chickens in residential areas subject to new regulatory backyard hen bylaw. And the minor housekeeping amendment to the animal control bylaw would be to require new set fines for chickens in residential areas, just as part of enforcement measures, as well as to adjust some of the regulations and wording in that bylaw to align it with the project going forward. And then a new standalone bylaw will assist with effective enforcement and project implementation as far as a new backyard hen bylaw goes, and that will fall under the Municipal Act, not under the Planning Act. And so through some preliminary analysis with the county's risk management officials at Cambium Inc., it's been determined that chickens will pose a significant threat to municipal drinking water sources in vulnerable source water protection areas, as well as wellhead protection areas. The threat posed by chickens in these areas is largely due to agricultural source material, such as chicken manure. Specifically, the presence of E. coli bacteria pathogens within chicken manure, which could potentially contaminate drinking water sources. The county's source water protection plan states the storage and handling and application of agricultural source material under certain quantities and circumstances within municipal wellhead protection areas with high vulnerability scores should be prohibited. And while there may be a safe or low number of chickens that could potentially be kept in the wellhead protection areas, from a purely analytical standpoint, any number of chickens, even one, does represent a threat. And this threat does increase based on as the number of chickens within these areas increases. So it is cumulative impact based. So to alleviate any potential threats, continue to protect municipal drinking water sources, and alleviate potential equity and enforcement issues, it has been suggested through this report that chickens be prohibited within source water protection areas, and that will most likely specifically relate to both Paris and St. George. It should be mentioned as well that drinking water threats could exist in the non-urban residential areas. So these would exist outside of the urban areas of Paris and St. George. So private wells will also need to be considered for protection as well. So setbacks will need to be considered, placement of coops, etc. And so with that, as I said, 5 slides, I'll wrap up. So we're really just seeking feedback from committee tonight to move forward in preparing a draft backyard hen bylaw, as well as amending bylaws for the comprehensive zoning bylaw and animal control bylaw, and also prepare a recommendation report, which will return back to committee as soon as possible. Again, hopefully May, if appropriate. As well, public engagement has launched for this project. So a survey is available online for residents to participate in. We are collecting feedback from now until essentially the beginning of April, when we'll be working on hopefully finalizing some of those recommendation items to bring back to committee. The survey will close March 29th as well for folks, and Engage Brant is open for comments to be posted as well as questions to be posed to staff. And we welcome feedback from the public on this. So with that, I will open it up for questions. Thank you.
Councillor House.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Jessica. Thank you for the report. Some new information there that we haven't seen before in terms of the water issue. I want to understand that a little bit better. I'm going to have a couple specific questions on that. Before I get to that, we know that there are already backyard chickens in existence in urban areas. And we also know that there are new households or households that want to have new backyard chickens within the county of Brant in urban areas. What we don't know is if and when we allow backyard chickens with rules wrapped around them, we don't know if the existing backyard chickens will sign up and make themselves known and follow the rules. That's an unknown right now. I wanted to ask some questions of clarity about the map. And I personally was having a little trouble understanding it, and I'm wondering if other people from the public may have trouble understanding it. I can see where a green area is a municipal well, and I can see where wellhead protection areas A, B, C, and D are. And those are areas where the recommendation would be to not have backyard chickens due to a threat. I believe that's what you're saying. And then, but I wasn't clear on the pale green significant groundwater recharge area, which seems to be almost everywhere in the county. Is that also an area where the recommendation would be to prohibit backyard chickens, specific to the recharge area? And because when I'm looking at this, if I'm understanding it correctly, it looks like the north half of Paris would be a no chicken zone, basically between the municipal wells, the wellhead protection areas, and the significant groundwater recharge areas. South half of Paris maybe will be chicken central. I don't know. It doesn't have any overlays on it. And then my last two questions will be, in those wellhead protection areas, do we prohibit agricultural chickens? Like some of that area of those wellhead protection areas would fall under rural agricultural areas. I'm wondering if we prohibit like farms having chickens in that area. And then my last question is we saw that Engage Brant opened up today, and we've encouraged people to have their say, ask their question. Could you speak a little bit more on the process of what happens with those comments and questions? Thanks.
Through the chair to Councillor House. So I'll try to sequence my answers back appropriately to your questions posed. So just bear with me and please let me know if I do miss anything. But so my understanding of the source water protection areas is limited, but we are working with Cambium Inc., our risk management officials, to develop some comprehensive mapping that we will also bring back as part of the recommendation report. But essentially, chickens would not be prohibited within the groundwater recharge areas, so those green water, the green shaded areas on the map that you had referenced. It would only be in the what we essentially short form and call WAPAs. So there are a number of different WAPAs on the map. They're represented. So the shading classifies and essentially just allows you to understand the closer that you get to the actual wellhead, the more significant the protections. So with that, you are correct in that the northern portion of Paris, as well as that of St. George, would most likely be prohibited as far as keeping chickens to protect those wellheads. Again, we're looking at developing some comprehensive mapping to assist with illustrating that, and we will absolutely be bringing that forward as part of the recommendation report. The only other item that I would like to add just on that note is restrictive covenants. So restrictive covenants could further restrict where chickens are actually able to be kept on properties. So restrictive covenants do exist, to the best of our knowledge, through conversations with developers of the newer subdivisions, specifically within Paris. There are restrictive covenants in place on all of those properties to specifically restrict things like the keeping of livestock, which does include chickens. So that would effectively prohibit the keeping of chickens on most of the properties, I would say, in Paris. Restrictive covenants can also be registered on properties that have been long-standing and existed for a number of years. It's not just limited to newer properties or newer developments, I'll say. Anyone can place a restrictive covenant on their property. So it would be up to the property owner before they effectively kept chickens to do a bit of research and check title to ensure that they are not subject to a restrictive covenant. Hopefully that sort of answers the source water portion for first half of the questions. I believe the second half was in relationship to the engagement portion of the project. So with respects to Engage Brant, we do monitor Engage Brant all the time. We actually get email notifications when any questions or comments come in or are posed to staff. Those questions, comments, as well as the survey results and any emails as well that are emailed directly to staff, either myself or Greg through the project, those will all be compiled and form part of an engagement summary that will form part of an attachment to the recommendation report that we'll bring forward as part of next steps. I hope that answers.
Yeah, very well. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions of clarity? Councillor Oakley.
Through the chair, first a quick procedural question, and then I have a question to planning staff. Given that we set aside 10C from our procedural bylaw, would the public be speaking after committee speaks here, or when does that factor into play here?
They will speak after this.
Okay, perfect. Okay, and then to follow up with my question to staff, so the RMO assessed and said that the chickens in the residential areas would be a threat to our municipal drinking water. How did the RMO assess this? Did they assess the risk of worst case scenario, all the chickens that are viable to have chickens on them via preliminary criteria would have them and thus produce our worst case maximum number of chickens? Was a safe limit investigated? You mentioned that there was analytically a safe or potentially a safe amount of chickens. And if the answer from staff is that even one chicken would be an unsafe number of chickens, does staff have a plan to proactively assess and ensure that there are no chickens within the wellhead protection area if the answer is that they are so unsafe that there cannot be even one in the area?
Through the chair to Councillor Oakley. So I will again try to answer that as best I can. So I think the question is there a magic number or a determined number through analytics of the amount of chickens that could potentially be kept within the source water protection areas? So through our discussions with Cambium at this point, there hasn't been a specific number that has been given to staff. We're going to continue to, of course, talk with Cambium through the project and analyze to see and make a determination, again, develop some comprehensive mapping to really illustrate these areas in better detail, and to sort of delineate where exactly the buffering would occur in relationship to the wellhead protection areas. Again, just going back to, even if there is a low or potentially acceptable number that could be kept in these areas, it is the concept that even one chicken could potentially be a threat to the source water protection and municipal drinking water in the area. And that's just because of the production of the agricultural source material, which is essentially the chicken manure. It would really just come down to enforcement of those areas. So if there was the ability to keep a specific number of chickens in those areas, a potentially low amount, if you will, it would really come down to a burden coming down onto enforcement officers to go out and ensure that compliance was consistently maintained, to essentially ensure that threats are mitigated around the clock and that regulations are followed to a T. That's really the best answer that I can give at this particular point.
Follow-up question?
Just a quick follow-up. In that regards, as it relates to the enforcement, my concern is if it's the opinion of staff that even one chicken is a risk vector, or if there is a safe number of chickens that needs to be carefully monitored. In my mind, both of those speak to that we need to have active enforcement in that regards. And it would be a burden, it would require staffing resources, but if this is the concern, given that it's one of the things that all of us personally can be held liable for, then it would be appropriate, if that is staff's opinion, that the risk is too high to have these chickens, that we must actively enforce it, whether it's 0 chickens allowed or whether or not it's 100 chickens allowed and we have a finite number of licenses.
Through the chair to Councillor Oakley, maybe what I'll do also is just invite Greg Bergeron up to just add to my response.
Through the chair. That's a difficult question to answer at this point. I think right now what we're doing is we're trying to assess, what we're going to do in those source water protection zones. We are still speaking to our Cambium, who is the contractor for the county. I mean, we do have an enforcement policy that generally dictates that we are complaint generated, and I think we would probably seek council's direction on how they want to deal with that moving forward, if we do decide that we want to proactively enforce.
Councillor Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I'm going to just do a follow-up on that particular one, then I've got a couple of questions as well. And Greg, you kind of hit my question where I was going there, and the fact that, fortunately, we got some major feedback here. Fortunately or unfortunately, however you want to look at it, bylaw is, for the most part, complaint driven. And if we're expecting our bylaw folks to, enforcement folks to actively monitor and go around and to ensure that, there aren't any chickens or one chicken or however it's going to be in these protected areas, because I agree with Councillor Oakley, when we're talking our water, we are all personally liable for that, 100%. That is going to put a huge burden on your team who is already to the max. And this isn't a diss to your team at all, but I don't think that's possible for you to do that. And that's just reality. I don't think you have enough staff. You could probably double, triple your staff, and it would still be a difficult task to do. So to me, that's a stickler in right off the hop. That's a lose-lose situation rather than a win-win. So I'll be interested to see how the conversation comes out on that there. So the questions that I have, on page 76 of the report, it talks about the committee endorsed a maximum of 4 chickens on a property. That's fine, with no ability to increase. That's fine. Exclusion of multi-unit uses in exclusion of multi-unit uses and zones, and it talks about row housing and condominiums and such. So if I'm reading this correctly, and we have a number of these row houses in Paris now, so anybody in that row house is not able to have chickens, yet the house right beside that row house, and there's multiple areas where that happens, would be allowed to have. So again, I'd like clarification on that, because if in fact, you know, that is going to be the case, I'm sure that I'm going to get a few phone calls on that one.
Through the chair to Councillor Pierce. So you are correct. So that could be a possibility in that essentially you could end up with a property that is potentially able to keep chickens if they meet all regulations, and properties that are unable to keep chickens if they can't meet regulations for whatever reason, whether that has to do with the typology of the dwelling or the zone, or even the ability to meet regulations. You could have two singles abutting one another, and one neighbor meets the regulations, one neighbor doesn't. You could have a neighbor that has a restrictive covenant on their property because they live in one of those newer subdivisions, and you have a portion of an older subdivision abutting, for instance. There could be a number of different scenarios. We call those inequities, essentially, in regards to this project, where you have that sort of imbalance or perceived imbalance going on, whatever the case may be. Unfortunately, there's not necessarily a real way to determine where that's going to occur, how many properties that might affect. That's sort of out of staff's analysis for this report, but we can absolutely see that probably happening, just given even how a zoning bylaw functions, for instance.
Okay, no, I appreciate that answer. Like I say, it's this whole chicken subject is kind of sticky, and it's either, there's no medium ground here. People either want them or don't want them. So this is going to be very difficult. And then when it talks about, you know, the complaint driven and stuff like that, I made on page 90, when it talks about odor, my question was going to be, is that going to be strictly complaint driven as well? Because again, our staff does not have the appropriate devices for odor. So again, is it going to be potentially, and again, I'm just talking hypothetically here, do we have one case where we're going to be actively pursuing this, and we've got another case where it's going to be complaint driven? Because that's going to make it even more difficult for your team. I'm curious about that.
Yes, through the chair. So yes, I believe that would be complaint driven as well. And you know, the bylaw that's in draft right now, we do have some mechanisms to deal with that, where we can make the owner basically clean up the coop. Going back to your point, I think you should, you know, if we decide that we want to do proactive measures and start going into people's backyards randomly, it's probably something that we should seek legal advice on.
I would agree with that wholeheartedly, for sure. Okay. And one last one, if I could, Mr. Chair, on page 103, when it talks about Norfolk County, when it's got the different counties that have them and don't have them, the restrictions, it's interesting because they suggest that the owner of the chickens must reside on the property where they're kept, and then rental properties need to get written permission from the owner in order to do that on the property. Is that type of thing that we're going to be looking at here potentially as well, if this goes through?
Through the chair to Councillor Pierce. So that did form part of staff's suggestions as part of table 1.1 and attachment 1 of the report. So that was a consideration put forward for committee to take a look at, as far as whether or not something to that effect is included in draft regulations going forward. Staff's happy to make any inclusions that the committee might find appropriate, or take any suggestions as well from the committee.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate all the work you did on this.
Cool. Councillor Chambers, then Councillor Bell, and then Councillor House.
Thank you. Through you, I just want to, I'm looking at page 3 of 5, page 75 of 141, and the underlined portion is that chickens will pose a significant drinking water threat. And that leads to the conclusion that, based on preliminary analysis, chickens will be prohibited within the urban residential areas of Paris and St. George. So what we're saying here is that you can't have chickens in Paris or St. George because it poses a drinking water threat. So I'm going to talk about Burford, which isn't on a municipal system, it's on private wells. And when you talk about private wells, you go into a discussion about setbacks, depending on the type of well, the depth of the well, what the well is, whether it's a point or those kind of things. In Burford, for example, a lot of people don't know what their wells are. And that's not saying something that's derogatory, it's just a fact. They're not sure how deep their wells are. They're not sure whether it's, so is the county now going to make a determination on setbacks, whether people in Burford can have chickens or not? The same thing can be said about Scotland. And if one chicken will bring down the whole town of Paris and St. George, a bunch of chickens in the village of Burford on private systems, which is an area that has high nitrates to begin with, may not be a good idea for Burford either, or Scotland, or Glenmorris, or any other hamlet that is a populated area with private wells where chickens pose a threat to their drinking water. That having been said, has there been any consideration to just say, chickens aren't good. They're not good for the water. And if they're not good for the water, how can I explain to someone who doesn't want chickens, that tells me my neighbor has chickens, it's screwing up my water, or it may screw up my water? I would say that, am I going to side with the chickens or the non-chickens? I'm siding with the non-chickens because I don't want to be personally liable for a contamination of either a public water system or a private water system. Because when you're personally responsible, as a government makes us to be, then I can't see how anybody around a municipal council can agree to have chickens in a residential area if it's known that it poses a significant drinking water threat. So we've talked about Paris and St. George. I'm just wondering if you can talk about the smaller hamlets and the small villages and the more populated areas like Fairfield. Apparently is going to be the highest growing village in the county by doubling its population. But those things all have to be taken into consideration, which is ironic because the boundary of Burford, you can spread manure right up alongside the boundary of Burford and nobody cares. But you have one chicken, you can't have it in the town of Paris, which is kind of weird.
Through the chair to Councillor Chambers, sorry. I will try to provide some information in context of the non-urban residential areas or the villages like Burford and Scotland and Oakland, or areas where there are private wells for drinking water. So in consultation with MOECP, as well as in consultation with Cambium Inc., our understanding is that the protective setback for private wells should be somewhere around 100 feet from the private well. So it would really depend in that circumstance. It would really come down to the size of lot that an individual has. Lot sizes can very much vary out in those areas. You can have smaller lots all the way up to acres. So it really does vary in that context. There could be potential for, again, some landowners to have chickens and maybe reasonably have them located far enough away from a private well, setbacks to mitigate all of the other sorts of nuisances discussed in the report. But again, that's a bit contextual and it's a bit property by property based. I'm not sure if that helps answer that question.
I'm going to go to Councillor Garneau. She hasn't had a chance to speak yet, and then I'll come back.
All right, just getting myself unmuted there. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to staff, 2 questions. Since it appears that we may be moving in a direction that will result in areas where there are currently chickens that aren't supposed to be there, being again deemed areas where there are not supposed to be chickens. Have we given any initial thoughts to what's going to happen to those non-compliant birds? Because if I'm hearing correctly, our level of risk to well water is too high to accept the presence of chickens. And under our current bylaws, we've had enforcement challenges that largely result in fines and, I guess, for lack of a better word, a stalemate. So does this mean that we're then approaching that threshold where we're actually apprehending birds or requiring their surrender? And the other question I would ask is with regards to other pets in these areas, and do they pose the same level of risk to water supply? I'm thinking about the outdoor cats and dogs that are also soiling backyards in and around wells. What that threshold is, because many of the folks who are looking at the backyard chickens, I do think see them more as pets than as livestock. So thank you.
Through the chair to Councillor Garneau, I will answer the enforcement question. If it's brought to our attention, we can certainly deal with properties that are non-compliant. I keep hearing through these various meetings that there are some properties, and we've had complaints in the past where we've been effectively able to work with the resident to have the chickens removed. We would take the same approach and give the residents the reasonable opportunity to come into compliance. Barring that, I mean, we would have to commence legal proceedings, which we would like to avoid, but that's a necessary tool that we have to use sometimes. And I'll let Jessica answer the other question about pets. I don't think it was in the scope, but Jessica?
Through the chair to Councillor Garneau, so Greg just mentioned, so based on the scope of the project being simply chickens at this point, that's the context as far as the analysis has gone for the protection of in relationship to source water or private wells. So I can't really speak to other types of animals or limitations or concerns relating to any types of other animals at this point.
That's okay.
I can also add to that. There are provisions in the animal control bylaw that deals with pet owners that have to basically pick up after their animals, which is a complaint that we frequently deal with.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to go to Councillor Bell, then Councillor Miller, and then Councillor House.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Jessica. The title of your report is Chickens in Residential Areas. And as Councillor Chambers pointed out, on page 3 of the report, you said, based on preliminary analysis, chickens will be prohibited within the urban residential areas of Paris and St. George. So 70% of our residential areas have gone. On the next section on private well protections, you say you need a setback of 30 metres. Well, in Burford, I know it reasonably well, to find 30 metres of setback from a house for chickens will also eliminate probably 70% of the residential areas of Burford. It doesn't leave very much. I mean, it's pretty selective, it's pretty limited. If you overlay on that the challenge to us as councillors and our responsibilities for water, I think we should step back and say, why are we doing this? Is this the best use of our staff? Even if we went through with this, we can see a wall of bylaw enforcement issues and planning issues coming our way. I think we're making absolutely the wrong decision if we were to proceed in this way. I will not support the motion, but I do think that we have to recognize that this is being driven by a relatively small number of people. Clearly, when you do the analysis, and I'd love to see that picture, Jessica, of the county and the areas you basically say you can't do it, you can't do it, you can't do it. What is left is just simply not worth the effort. Thank you.
Councillor Miller.
I think we're just at questions at this point. We're not debating.
We're not supposed to be debating. No. Yeah.
just a couple questions. I think I was as surprised as my colleagues about the water. In the report, can you fix the name of Cabium to Cambium because it's spelled wrong? It shouldn't be. Because if people go to look up Cabium, it's going to take you to somewhere totally different. So, the threat to drinking water, just to be clear, the only threat is E. coli. It's not nitrates, ammonium, salmonella, anything else. It's just E. coli. I want to be clear on that.
Through the chair to Councillor Miller. So there could be other potential threats as well. E. coli is one that I think folks tend to be most familiar with. And there does tend to be a significant amount of association between that E. coli, and agricultural source material, pathogens mainly.
Okay, like I said, I'm surprised. And then, I mean, it's a good report. And I always like those reports where you go through it and you got a question, then you answer it later in the report. And that was with the water. Okay, so if it's not good for source water protection, how does it affect wells? You say that 30 meters. Keep in mind it's 30 meters on one side, so in reality it's 60 meters. Do the math, and I'll go from meters to imperial. That's about 2/3 of an acre, right? So if I look at along the lines of my two colleagues to my left, if you look at the total area that this potential bylaw would affect, it doesn't impact the rural areas, right?
Through the chair to Councillor Miller. So it could potentially impact some of those areas. It would really depend on who could potentially meet the regulations and who could potentially meet the criteria to be able to safely keep chickens on the property.
Okay, but if we're looking at farms, this isn't for them. We take out, I would say, Councillor Bell guesstimated maybe 70%. I think we'd be closer to 80, 90% because, like I say, it's 2/3 of an acre that can't be there. Huge sections of St. George, huge sections of Paris. Has staff looked at what percentage of our residents this would apply to? And don't forget, we also have to take out the townhouses and the row houses and any apartment buildings. Do we have a guesstimate of how many people this would impact percentage-wise?
Through the chair to Councillor Miller. So we don't have an exact number of potential impact, but I'm sorry, I misunderstood. So it will still, it will exclude the agricultural areas. So you were correct. So those areas will not be subject to any regulations or any potential regulations relating to residential chickens. They're subject to completely different criteria, ministry guidelines and such, but we don't have a comprehensive correlated number, essentially letting folks know what amount of the county would be impacted or what amount would be able to keep.
Okay, fair enough. But reading that, I couldn't help but think this is really not going to be applicable to well, I would say a majority of the residents. Okay, thank you.
Councillor House.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Through you to Jessica. The one question we didn't touch on before. First, I want to say we're learning a lot tonight in this, so we really value your report, and I think we see where this is going, maybe, but it's important that we go through the public engagement process, which just started today. My specific question for you now, one, is within these wellhead protection areas that you've identified on the map, and I look forward to more detailed maps next time. Since a chicken or two could be a threat to the drinking water in these areas of Paris and St. George, and I'm looking specifically at the Paris part, and it's a little hard to tell from the map, but I'm guessing it's from maybe Silver Street out into the country almost as far as Pinehurst, like Pinehurst Park, not Pinehurst subdivision. It's a big area. Since a couple of chickens could be a threat to our drinking water, what steps are taken by the County of Brant to prevent chickens from being in the rural areas within those wellhead protection areas?
Through the chair to Councillor House. So if I understand the question correctly, I think your concern is with respect to the agricultural areas that fall within those source water protection areas according to the mapping, and what sorts of protections are in place, considering some of those properties do keep livestock, be it chickens or other forms of livestock on their property. So my understanding, and albeit I can't go into too much detail on this just because I don't have the expertise to, but there are plans in place with each of those property owners to assess exactly the operations that are occurring, the agricultural operations that are occurring on site. And there are plans in place to assess the handling of the manure on site, also the types of livestock, how the livestock are housed, if they're grazing livestock, and there's plans in place that essentially assess the potential threats based on that property, and then the mitigation measures that are in place to address mitigating those potential threats as well. So there are comprehensive plans in place to take a look at that, and those plans are developed in consultation with folks like our risk management officials who have a great deal of expertise in the protection of the wellhead areas. That's my ability to answer that question. I can definitely get you some further information on that, a little more detail if you'd like as well.
Thank you. I know that I've driven around some of the rural parts of North Paris and North St. George, and people will have chickens walking around their backyard, and right, like free range chickens just bopping around, and none of us have ever given it a second's thought. You're out in the country, makes sense, but we're learning that a chicken or two could be a threat to the drinking water in a wellhead protection area, and it's something we're going to have to look at in those zones. It looks like west of the Grand River for Paris and northwest parts of St. George. So thank you.
I'll go to Councillor Kyle and then Councillor Gonzalez.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Through you, kind of along the same lines as Councillor House, you sort of asked part of my question that I was going to ask, but so I think it's the nutrient management plans that you were referring to as far as the farms go.
Through the chair to Councillor Kyle, so it's actually the risk management plans. So when a property falls within the risk management assessment area, they're forced to undertake a risk management plan to assess threats to the potential drinking water sources and the mitigation of those threats. So those plans, in my understanding, albeit limited, are in addition to the nutrient management plans as well.
Okay, and so I guess my question for that is, what triggers that? So if I'm out in the countryside and I have a property that's zoned agriculture, I move out from the city, gonna start my little homestead with some chickens running everywhere, how do I know as that property owner that I have to do that assessment before I can get those chickens? I just, kind of along the same lines as Councillor Howes, like just looking at this map without the actual roads on it, I can think of a lot of chickens that I know of within these wellhead areas and source water areas. So I'm just curious what triggers that risk management thing.
So again, my limited understanding is that it's under the Clean Water Act. So when the Clean Water Act was established, it essentially required that any potential threats be assessed within these areas, and that any threats develop plans for mitigatory measures. So that's sort of my understanding. So it wouldn't just be for chickens, to be clear, in these areas. It would mainly relate to anyone who's keeping livestock, particularly any form of livestock, whether they're housed in a building or whether they're free range and grazing. Also, the manure side of things as well. Even spreading, that's my understanding. Even chemicals too, to treat the land, are assessed under these acts as well, I do believe, and storage of materials too. So they are fairly comprehensive. I do believe that there was quite a bit of field work that was done when the Clean Water Act came into place to work with property owners to identify whom specifically should have one of these plans in place. And I do believe that they sort of went out property to property, if I can remember correctly, to engage with folks and develop these plans.
Follow up if I can, Mr. Chair. Okay, no, that's helpful, and I will let you know that technically we don't have to have a nutrient management plan on our farms unless we go to do something new. So we are currently on our farm, for example, going through the process of having to do that, but we've never had to do that before. We could voluntarily do it. So I just wondered if somebody wants to do something new, whether it be flagged in the system or once that original plan was done with the Clean Water Act, whether that follows the property.
Through the chair to Councillor Heil, I'm happy to provide some more information on that. I don't have it on hand, but I can definitely connect with you after the meeting to provide that.
Going to go to Councillor Garneau now.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to introduce a new topic for questions and follow up on an earlier one. We spent a lot of the conversation on Paris and St. George, turning our attention more to the countryside, particularly out my way. So I'm thinking of places like McBay Road, Brant School, Jerseyville, etc. There are properties zoned agricultural and there are properties with residential zoning designations that by and large from the road look and feel quite similarly. This would perhaps create those inequities that are being discussed. Has there been given any thought in the next steps to permitting in that homestead, what I call the homesteading context, if we are not moving ahead in the more densified urban areas, just to make sure that those who truly live out in the country are not caught in the same inequities. I also want to follow up on the risk management comments in our consultants and whether we've asked for a second opinion. I'm having a hard time with this one, seeing that other municipalities that, again, look and feel similarly to us didn't come to the same conclusion. And with that, I'm wondering if we can then ask our consultants to also opine on the other domestic animal waste that would be present in those areas. And more of a comment for staff that for me, when we first came forward with the motion, one of the key pieces of that was that if we were not going to go ahead with chickens, that staff would come back to council with a program to bring folks into compliance. If I'm hearing tonight that one chicken is too many chickens in certain areas, I am concerned that moving through our typical bylaw process, which can take some time, puts us at a risk, because if that one bird does create that big of a risk, how will we protect ourselves as a council as that moves through the courts?
Through the chair to Councillor Garneau. So I think I can try and answer the first question there about the non-urban residential areas that are sort of outlying village areas, sort of right in and amongst the agricultural properties, sort of the rural residential areas, we call them right now, through the classification in the zoning bylaw. So those areas would be considered as part of this project. They are being considered as part of this project. The regulations would essentially apply to all residential areas. So again, it would just be up to whether or not a property could meet the potential regulations, whether those be in relationship to minimum lot size, setbacks, again, setbacks to neighboring or surrounding private wells, those sorts of things. I'll invite Greg up, I think, to maybe give some context on the enforcement.
Through the chair to Councillor Garneau, I'm not sure that I can answer your question. I think it's more of a legal question that you're seeking advice on, and I'm not qualified to give you that. You know, I think you should probably maybe have a discussion with legal counsel. I'm sorry, that's the only answer I can give you.
Councillor Oakley and then Councillor Bell. Now, technically, we're still just asking questions of clarity, so we've gone beyond that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just a couple questions of clarity. Speaking along the lines of what some of our municipal peers are doing, searching through the extensive document of other municipal approaches, the only one that I can see that has a similar wellhead protection policy would be City of Kawartha Lakes. Would it be staff's opinion that out of our peer municipalities that we've taken a look at, that none other would have these wellhead areas, or similar to what Councillor Garneau suggested, perhaps their RMOs did not suggest that it was undue risk? A couple offhand that look like they might be in a similar situation as us with wellheads would be Town of Georgina or Halton Hills. Both have similar sort of geographic layouts as we do with some urban areas, some rural areas, and potentially pulling from some well water. Just I'm skeptic that there is this much risk out of one nuclear chicken, or even a handful of chickens, especially when we have, as Councillor Cowell alluded to, lots of chickens running around in agricultural areas that we might not be necessarily taking account for, that are within those wellhead protection areas. So I'm wondering if this RMO particular has some of this risk overblown.
Through the chair to Councillor Oakley. So there could definitely be potential other municipalities that also have run an analysis as far as source water protection goes. I'll say that in consultation with Cambium Inc., the analysis was done specific to the county and our wellheads, so I can't readily speak to that relationship in context. We can always do some further digging and take a look and try to see what we can find and report back.
Thank you.
Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Jessica. Have you spoken with our Medical Officer of Health on this issue?
Through the chair to Councillor Bell, no, I have not spoken with the Minister of Health on this issue.
Not the Minister of Health, our
Sorry.
medical Officer of Health.
Medical
You
officer.
can speak to the Minister of Health as well. I'm sure she has an opinion. But no, I'm thinking about Dr. Comley in the Brant County Health Unit.
I have not spoken with her as of yet, no, but we would be more than happy to reach out as part of the project and as part of the engagement aspect.
Yeah, I would suggest you do, if I may. One of the related matter. A little while ago, I asked the health unit to do an analysis of the health of the wells in Brant County. And we have about, I think it was 8,000 wells in Brant County. The health unit offers a free well testing service. Of the 8,000 wells, 12% of them test regularly. About 3% of them test as regularly as they should, which is 3 times a year. And just to go back to the issue of residential properties in our more rural areas, we're already running a risk because people don't test their wells. And if we compound that risk, I don't think it's a step we should take lightly. Thank you.
Okay. Do we have any other questions of clarity? Okay. Okay, thanks very much for all those comments. I'm going to open it to the public if there's any questions from the public or comments. Okay. If you come forward and state your name and address.
I thought it was on. I'm sorry. Nathan Etherington, 43 Catherine Street. I wasn't even thinking about coming here tonight. And then I heard this and I immediately heard alarm bells ringing. Most of you do not understand groundwater and how groundwater works. I did a hydrogeology degree. I understand how water flows and water flows through the ground. I also did a course in contaminant hydrogeology. And what we would consider chicken, or that E. coli source, that would be what we call contaminants. And contaminants flow through the ground in a plume. And that's why when you look at the figure that I'm looking at on the screen right now, with those groundwater source protection areas, that is why those areas are outlined, because any contaminant in that ground can then travel and get into the wellhead field. As well, it also depends on the distance, right? The proximity to the source. So the further you are away from the wellhead, the less likely it is for that contaminant to then enter the groundwater protection and the groundwater, and therefore get into the municipal system. So answering some of the other councillor questions, Burford is entirely on that recharge area, and that's why the entirety of that area is mapped out. To Councillor Garneau's point, out in the east end, that is all clay. The geology of that area is entirely different. You think about clay, clay's impervious, so if you have a source contaminant out there, it's going to take a lot longer for it to get through the ground and into any drinking water source. So it is going to take a significantly longer time, and that can also clean things up. If I were to look at a map, and it's called the Superficial Geology of Brantford, it's called map M2240, and if you were to take that and align the Paris Moraine, which is where the groundwater recharge happens, it basically lines up with all that green that you're seeing on the map. So that's where all of the drinking water comes from for our entire community. And having one chicken, you can probably get it's probably not too bad. But then when you start opening up the door, okay, one person has a chicken, then what's stopping me from having a chicken? And then you got how many chickens in that area? And it's only a matter of time before your groundwater does get contaminated. And then you have a situation like Walkerton. And do we want that here? I do not think so. So I'm fully supportive of what staff have kind of highlighted here, that this is not a good area to go, nowhere close to it. And if you want me to come back at some future time and give you kind of a briefing on the geology of the area and groundwater contamination, how it works, I'd be more than happy to do that. Thank you.
Do we have any other members of the public that would like to speak? Please come forward and state your name and address, please. You have up to 10 minutes to speak.
My name is Mark Phillips. I live at 13 Church Street, East in Scotland. I just want to say thank you to the council to having this open to the public tonight. And thank you to Jessica and Greg for the presentation. I did find this very interesting as I was looking at, I'm a former resident of the city of Brantford, so I was looking at their chicken bylaw before I came tonight. And I realized that our Eston County have a totally different geographic than the city of Brantford. So I am concerned because I do have a current neighbor who has illegal chickens. And so I really wanted to be here tonight to hear what council was going to do with everything.
Sorry, point of order. If you get the microphone on, we have some people online.
Oh, can you hear me now? All right, do I have to repeat everything I just said? All right, I live in Scotland. I have a neighbor who has chickens. I'm glad I came here tonight. Thank you for the presentation. I am concerned because I want to know what's happening. I want to know what is going to be proposed in the county of Brant. I am a county resident for the last 3 years now, so I am concerned about what has happening. We are on wells, so I am concerned about the groundwater, especially with my current neighbor having the chickens. And thank you for letting me speak. And I'm eager to hear what is the final proposal for this chicken issue. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay. Is there any other members of the public that'd like to speak? Okay. I'll open for debate. Okay. Is there any further comments from the council before we consider the recommendation? Council Miller.
Oh, sorry, are we deliberating or?
Yeah, we're deliberating now.
Okay, well, the only thing I just want to say then, it was a good report. I suspect Jessica's probably having nightmares about chickens now when she sleeps, but the concerns, there's just concerns I've thought of, there's concerns I've brought up in the report, like inequity. You know, some people who live maybe in apartments or townhouses, they can't have them. Obviously, there's huge chunks of the rest of the county that wouldn't be allowed to have them. There's a lot of health issues, and we didn't even talk about it tonight. I know we talked about it a great deal before, but the reason the City of Toronto did away with their pilot program was because of avian influenza. We didn't even talk about that. But there's a lot of health issues. The report mentioned zoonotic illnesses, Salmonella, E. coli, and then again, avian flu. Again, it didn't come up in tonight's discussion, but there's issues in the report regarding rodents such as rats or coyotes. There's going to be increased staffing, increased costs, a lot of noise. One of the things that the report did say, and I actually disagree with it, is the first sentence talks about social impacts. Some social benefits attributed to keeping chickens include decreased food costs. I honestly don't think with 4 chickens you're going to save enough money in eggs to justify all the care that goes into doing that. So looking at all the risks, I don't believe they're going to outweigh the small benefits for going ahead with a bylaw. I think if we were really wanted to do something about food costs and sustainable food and lifestyle, we'd be better to put our money into what Councillor Oakley's predecessor talked about, and that would be a community garden. So I'm not going to support the recommendation to continue on with this. I think we should just drop it and leave it, but we'll see how the vote goes.
Okay. Councillor Bell, then Councillor Pierce.
Yeah, I think Councillor Miller just summarised what I was going to say, so I don't need to say more. Okay. Councillor Pierce and Councillor Chambers had something to say.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, he's right on line where I was going. My question is, you know, and as I said earlier, I appreciate all the work that's been put into this, Jessica and whoever else had a hand in it, but I can't support it either. But my question is, if this is not supported, where do we go? Like, what does that do to the original motion that was passed to allow chickens in rural areas?
I think we also have the problem that we have a public engagement process in the process, but Matt, would you like to speak to that? Or?
Actually, if it's possible, I'll defer this one back to Jessica in terms of process and next steps.
Through the chair to, I believe it was, I'm sorry, Councillor Pierce, thank you. So we have opened up public engagement on the project. Public engagement will remain open until end of March, beginning of April on the project, at which point it will close. The intention was to just gather feedback on the project based on the original option that was provided and directed to staff to investigate and bring forward. Which was to permit chickens in all residential areas. That said, we're happy to take whatever direction committee provides to us and move the project forward from there.
Okay. Councillor Chambers or Coleman, would you like to say anything at this point? I thought I saw your hand up earlier. Okay. Councillor Codd. Councillor Codd.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Through you. So I am 100% concerned about the source water issues. That's something that, as someone who works in the beef sector, I'm well aware of Walkerton and the catastrophic result that happened there, and wanting to prevent that from happening again. So I definitely do take those concerns seriously, although to Councillor Garneau's point, it does raise some more questions for me in terms of the properties that are located in the rural areas. I'm not concerned about the chicken farms per se, understanding how all of their on-farm safety protocols come into play, and that's all been taken care of. But we do have quite a number of rural properties that have chickens that will not have those plans, because unless you're a commercial operation and a quota license holder, you're not obligated to follow those rules. So I do have some more questions about that. One thing we haven't really talked about tonight is biosecurity, and that was one of the main impetus for bringing this forward originally, in that we have a number of chickens that are around the county that we have no knowledge of where those are, and if in the event of something like avian flu outbreak, we have no way of connecting with those owners in order to put those biosecurity protocols in place. I did note in the report that I believe it was Chatham-Kent, they do not allow chickens, but ironically that was the home of one of the backyard flocks that did create one of the most recent outbreaks. So my biggest concern with all of this, I'm not necessarily for or against chickens per se, but I would like to see some sort of something put around them so that we have some control over the chickens. So whether that's rules that allow people to have it and make it easier for our bylaw or whoever's enforcing it to deal with ones that are not compliant, or we don't allow them and we shut them down, whatever the case might be, I think there needs to be some rules. And if nothing else, I think this has brought that to the attention of this council and to the community, that we do need to think about some of these things. And there's often a lot of moving parts. It's not just water, it's not just biosecurity, it's not just nuisance, manure smell and things like that. But there's a lot of nuance that we need to take into consideration, and sometimes that means that something may not be able to be applied fairly to all across a geographic area that's very vast and different across the entire space. So just some musings from me, I guess, on the topic of chickens, but yeah, I am concerned about the water, but I'm not confident we've come to a solution for the biosecurity threat either.
Councillor Howes.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I think I was the one who moved the recommendation to get this on the table, so I want to speak to the process a little bit. The motion was to receive tonight's report as information, and then for this committee to provide direction back to county staff. And I think we've done that. I think we've had a very robust discussion. I think we've learned a lot. There was a lot of new information that we did not see until we saw this report. It would be tempting to kill the chicken plan right here, right now. But I don't think that's fair to the process. The public has just started an engagement process on this today. And I think it would be premature for us to make a decision tonight to say, hey, let's just cut our losses, save staff some time, kill this right here, right now. I don't think we should do that. I believe we've given Jessica a lot of good feedback. I look forward to detailed maps that actually show roads and things where we can actually see those wellhead protection areas and exactly where they factor in. So I just want to say I think it would be the right process for us to carry on with this motion the way it's written. Understanding, I think, that we all see where this is going. The one comment I'll make, and I didn't make it as a question, but I know Jessica's listening. The public is engaging on the information that's on the county website about this, which I don't think necessarily touches on the drinking water issue. And it might, if it's not in the information that's presented in that Engage Brant window, that might be a good addition, so that as the people are engaging with the process, they have all that information. Mr. Chair, would Jessica be able to respond to that?
I believe so. Jessica.
Thank you, Chair. Through the Chair, through to Councillor Howes. So you are correct. There isn't currently, as part of the survey or on the Engage Brant website, necessarily anything that calls direct attention to source water protection implications as far as this project goes. We have posted staff's report as well as the attachments that are before committee this evening. However, we'd be happy to develop as part of the frequently asked questions section something to that effect to provide some further maybe guidance and information on that.
Thank you. Follow up, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Jessica. I think that would be wise. And I think as we go through the next touch point on these reports, we're going to have even more information so that when we're walking down the street or sitting in a coffee shop and somebody comes up to us and says, hey, how come I'm not allowed to have backyard chickens? We're going to be more informed to be able to give them the top 5 reasons why decisions were made the way they were made. So if things go that way. So thank you.
Okay. So we have any, Councillor Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and no pun intended, but we'll have egg in our face if we pull this tonight. We have to continue on because the public process has already started. Not that I've been a big lover of having backyard chickens, but we've got to continue the process, start it, let's do it, and let's move on.
Councillor Chambers and then Councillor Bell.
First of all, Mr. Chairman, I'd like the operative clauses to be voted on separately. There's 3 clauses there that some people may support one but not another. So I'd like them called separately. Okay. And secondly, I just want to make a point that it's never been said tonight or prior to that, but there is a process in place now. If people want backyard chickens, they can make an application to have backyard chickens and go through the planning process and prove to the planning committee and council that their application is warranted. And if they can meet setbacks, if they're in a particular area that is not a willet, those kind of things. That is in place now, similar to the fact that you can't have dog kennels. Dog kennels are prohibited in the county of Brant, but people can make application to have a dog kennel. And that's how the chickens are regulated currently, and that's what the previous council had put in place. So there is a mechanism for people to have backyard chickens if they want to go through the process of going through the expense of proving that they're not going to impact, have a negative, those kind of things. So with that being said, I'd ask that you call the question separately with the 3 operative clauses.
Okay. Councillor Bell.
Yeah, I was going along the same lines as Councillor Chambers because I think I'm concerned that our staff are doing work on this when they should just stop now, take that input, bring it back to council, don't do any bylaw updates, don't do any bylaw amendments until this council decides whether or not they want that work to be done. So I support Councillor Chambers' proposal.
Okay. Councillor Oakley.
Through the chair, just I've expressed some of my opinions to the question earlier, but I would just say, as a general, how I feel about this, I don't feel like we've addressed the biosecurity angle. I don't think we've really. I think we will breed more compliance and more buy-in and have a safer community if we put guidelines and rails around this rather than a blanket prohibition. I think you generally get more buy-in when you have rules and allow it through a process rather than just blanket bans.
I think, Councillor Garneau, and I think that will be the last.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. In fairness to the members of the public who have only just had their first opportunity to speak on this through Engage Brant, I do support the resolution as put forward by staff. I think we have to keep going with this process. But also because, as I mentioned earlier, we've spent a lot of the evening on certain areas of the community, but we haven't spent time on other areas of our community where the concerns that have been brought forward might not apply. And I wouldn't want to see that in a predominantly rural ward, being my own, folks who would otherwise look compliant if not for their zoning, lose out on this potential opportunity because there are challenges in other areas of the community. I think I think a lot of these folks often feel disproportionately served by the county, and I think we would do them a disservice if we didn't continue exploring this and make that decision around the council table. And to Councillor Kyle's point about the biosecurity, the loose chickens that could pose a real risk to our farmers are very much alive and well in these areas. They fly into my backyard for neighboring properties on a regular basis. So I want to make sure that if the answer is going to be no, that it's being done in a way that considers the diversity of the community first, not just our most densely populated communities. Thanks.
Okay, so having that said, Councillor Chambers.
I just have an amendment I'd like to propose to add to the operative clauses, if I might. I would move an amendment to add an additional operative clause that says that Engage Brant continue to engage the citizens by receiving information and providing information with regard to backyard chickens. With that, that would make 4 operative clauses, which I think can allow the engagement to proceed, but if you don't want staff to proceed, you can vote against those particular operative clauses. So hoping for a seconder.
Councillor Chambers, moved by Councillor Chambers, second by Councillor Coleman. But okay, I want to make sure I get this in the right order. Would you accept that as a friendly amendment, Councillor Howes, and the seconder, Councillor?
It's not a friendly amendment, Mr. Chairman, with respect.
Okay, so then I'll let Briar read it.
Through the chair. So just to give the plan here, we will vote on the first 3 clauses separately, as noted by Councillor Chambers, and then following that, we will vote on the 4th clause as the amendment, or a new motion, I guess. Is that agreeable, Councillor Chambers?
Just as a point of order, doesn't his motion need a vote first? Like not to vote on number 4, but to vote on allowing number 4.
Yes.
Okay. Councillor Chambers.
Technically, Councillor Howes is correct. The amendment is to add to the recommendation an operative clause that I said, if that gets added, that's added to the recommendation, and then you vote on all 4.
Okay, so we're going to vote on the operative clause. Okay, it's put forward by Councillor Chambers and seconded by Councillor Coleman. Okay, all those in favor? Okay. Anybody opposed? Okay, that is passed. Okay. Now we're going to, okay, Councillor Chambers.
So, Mr. Chairman, now the recommendation has been amended. It now has 4 operative clauses, and I would like all 4 operative clauses be voted on separately.
Then I can ask.
And that's a friendly amendment, right?
You said that's a friendly amendment. Okay, so then we don't have to vote on that amendment. Okay, so I'm going to have afterwards, and I'll have you read it out each section. Okay, I'm going to ask Briar to read out each section, and then we'll vote one at a time. Okay, so if you read the first one, and then we'll vote, and then, okay.
Okay, so the first clause is that RPT 0177-24 be received as information.
All those in favor? Okay, that is passed. Clause 2.
Councilor P.
I'd like to request the remaining to be record voted.
So we're going to have to do that one.
I'm not going to have people stand for this. Okay. The second clause reads that committee provide direction back to county staff on regulation of chickens in residential areas of the county to assist staff in preparing a new draft backyard hen bylaw for committee's further consideration. I'm gonna go one by one around the horseshoe. Please indicate yes or no if you're in the favor of the motion. Councillor Coleman. Councillor Miller.
No.
Councillor Chambers.
No.
Councillor Pierce.
No.
Councillor Bell.
Nope.
Councillor House.
Yes.
Councillor Oakley.
Yes.
Mayor Bailey.
No.
Councillor Kyle.
Yes.
Councillor Garneau.
Yes.
And McAlpine.
Yes.
Councillor McAlpine. I'm so sorry. That fails.
So it won't be going forward to staff. Okay, go ahead.
Alrighty, the third clause, and the county staff be directed to undertake amendments to the County of Brant Animal Control Bylaw 17410 and Comprehensive Zoning Bylaw 6116 as outlined within this report. Councillor Coleman. Councillor Miller.
No.
Councillor Chambers.
No.
Councillor Pierce.
No.
Councillor Bell.
No.
Councillor House.
No.
Councillor Oakley.
Yes.
Mayor Bailey.
No.
Councillor Kyle.
No.
Councillor McAlpine.
No.
Councillor Garneau.
Yes.
That fails. And the fourth and final clause. I'm not scrolling here. That the Engage Brant survey continue on. Councillor Coleman.
Yes.
Just a point of order, Madam Clerk. It's important to note in the operative clause that it is not only to receive information, but it is to provide information. I don't know whether that's incorporated with your motion or not.
Thank you for that. Okay, sorry, Councillor Coleman.
Yes.
Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Councillor Chambers.
Yes.
Councillor Pierce.
Yes.
Councillor Bell.
Yes.
Councillor House.
Yes.
Councillor Oakley.
Yes.
Mayor Bailey.
Yes.
Councillor Kyle. Yes. Councillor McAlpine.
Yes.
Councillor Garneau.
Yes.
Thank you, and that passes.
Okay. Well, thank you for the robust debate on that. We have no communications. And committee reports, we have the Agriculture Advisory Committee minutes, February 26th, and we have a recommendation to receive.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Coleman, second by Councillor Kyle. All those in favor? Okay, that is passed. Okay. We do have some other business. Councillor Miller?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And we were talking about unassumed subdivisions last year, 2023, and I'll commend staff for, I want to say Highland Estates, but that's not the right name for that subdivision, but they got it assumed by the county. It's been many decades waiting for that one, but there's other ones in the county that haven't been assumed, also waiting for decades. I had a question about one in Scotland there last week. I believe that's the Hunter subdivision. It encompasses Augustus Peter Street. But my question to staff, Mr. Chair, is I don't want to lose this momentum, and I'm just wondering at some point, can we get another update on where we are with those, and just to allay my fears that we haven't stalled on the process, but that we're continuing.
Pam, would you like to answer?
Hello?
We can see you, but we can't hear you.
Can you hear me? Okay, so through you, the chair to Councillor Miller. Yes, we are continuing as staff to work on unassumed subdivisions as a project, and we plan to report back to council in September.
Okay, thank you. And I will let the
Okay. Well, thanks for that reply. Was there any other business? I don't believe there was, so. Okay. We have no in-camera, and so our next meeting is April 9th, 2024 at the Council Chambers. Do we have a motion to adjourn? Moved by Councillor Pierce. We are adjourned.